Let's look at knight g to e7 this time in order to allow black to castle as soon as possible. Let's try to remember this pattern now. This is very important. The key move now that gives white a lead is f5. Let's try to understand why. We are expanding on the king side, okay? So black has no play on the queen side, right? It's going to take ages before all these pawns get rolling, and we can still even choose to castle on the king side anyway, and this many pawns in the center. The fact that the game is kind of open and we have the bishop pair gives us no worry for our king. Black only has two pieces, which is these two knights, two minor pieces. None of the rook, the queen, or the other rook are able to be developed immediately or to create any threat. So why f5? Because we're expanding on the king side. So soon enough we're going to be storming our pawns against the king side. So let's look at the best move by black now, which is queen d6. Develops the queen, right? Black really is behind with development. Develops the queen and gives black the chances to choose where to castle. And the queen also offers more protection over the 6th rank, which is about to be attacked. Maybe f6 was a potential idea, one of those disrupting moves. White continues now with c3. Why is this the best move? It paralyzes black. It stops black from playing knight d4. Not that knight d4 was going to be a problem, because in this position knight d4 is almost always met by queen f2. And then it's a waste of time because then we're going to play c3 again. So let's make an example. Although I'll go deeper into this at some point. Knight d4, queen f2. Well, we're not really threatening the knight, but we are protecting the square of the fork where the knight wants to go. And eventually nothing stops white from playing c3, so the knight will have to go. So that's a waste of time. So anyway, we play c3. So we're gonna go through the more accurate move, which is king castling long side. King castling short side is even worse, right? After king castling queen side, white is still better, but this is even worse. Now, if you let the engine play many moves in a row, this is what literally will happen. g4, h4, g5, bishop e3, castling, long, rook g1. Yeah, I forgot h5 by the way. And then f6, right? Now, it would be amazing if we get to play all these moves in a row, but unfortunately, as we all know, it's not possible. But the reason why I do it is because we want to see what the idea is. And the king side is compromised. One thing that is important to notice, right? If you're going to learn one thing from this video, it is about the paralyzation of the black pieces. Look at the white's queen side. We want to castle this side, potentially. There is no counterplay that black can do on the queen side. It's just going to be too slow. The queen doesn't have any access to light squares to go this way. The knight doesn't have access here, and even from a5 doesn't have access to any other squares. And anyway, white's pawn's attack on the king side is already started. Black pawns are still there. After g4, let's have a look at just a quick idea. For example, a move like g6. Let's remember this pattern. This is very basic but very important. f6 wins the game. Right, you're creating this weakness that's going to be there forever, nothing stopping you from doing what you want. And a move like f6 seems more logical, puts a little bit more attack on g5 and allows the rook to f7, and also allows potential idea of g6 with the knight and the pawn defending there. So black will have to swap a bunch of stuff, expose the king a bit, but it will also have pieces that can join the defense. Anyway, we play h4 now, and after a move like g6, black finally wants to get rid of a little bit of pressure that we have. We can play bishop h6, develop a piece, rook to f7, staying around these squares and around the king. Also because from e8, it will be on a closed file, or from d8, then we will play g5. Black will not be able to take the pawn because then we can advance. We've produced a very dangerous pass pawn. This is going to end really badly for black. Yeah, you can figure out how to win from here. And we don't have to worry about our d3 pawn. It's protected very well. And if black doesn't take, which will be the best move, and plays anything else, I don't know, if a5 or whatever, anything else, we are going to play moves like rook to g1, long castle, and h5. These moves are inevitable. They cannot be stopped. They will happen anyway. Let's remember the crucial fact that the black has no counterplay on the light squares. We're going to be swapping everything in here and throw our major pieces. We can even sacrifice pawns without problems to activate the major pieces. So let's go back a few moves. Right after the bishop h6 move, the rook to f7. Our king now, after rook f7, will castle alongside. Completely safe in here. Oh, and by the way, don't worry about moves like c4, because you just do nothing in these cases. Well, not right now because now you castle, but even before when c4 was maybe possible. Maybe you've been looking at c4, maybe with the queen going to c5, which looks like a better square. You don't have to worry about the pawn being taken as well. Then you can castle, you can just leave it there. This pawn, the black pawn going to d3, is completely harmless, and it kind of works as a shield for yourself. So okay, let's continue. Castle alongside. Best move by black now is king to h8. The idea is to attack the bishop with the knight in g8. After king to h8, we play rook to g1, and if knight to g8, we just go back to the bishop. We don't give up the bishop pair. There's no reason for that. The advantage is still a solid +4 more or less. And the best move by black now, believe it or not, is to go back with the knight to give more control over the square g6. Otherwise, if we get to take that pawn and then pawn takes back, we kind of achieve what we want, because eventually we'll be able to open the files. Now, best move is bishop to h3. We want to give more support to the f5 square, because our goal now is to play g5. So black continues with the best move, rook to g8, and we play g5. Best move by black is to take the pawn in f5. Well, taking in g5 will just allow our pieces to come forward. And let's just make an example so we can finally finish this line. After pawn takes, we take with the bishop, believe it or not. And black may think of just giving away the knight for the bishop, in order to reduce the attack. Anyway, we still have a goal of playing h5, g6. If black takes, then we can take back with the pawn. And now we're gonna play eventually h5, g6. It depends also on how black plays. We will have a chance of simply use the rook and the queen to defend the passed pawn. So if black doesn't take, if black takes, then we just take back. And this is just a tremendous torture for the black player. Right now we have an idea of playing rook to h1, queen to h5, and g6. And we're just going to stop it there, right? So I'm just going to say one more time that we've gone very far away from the opening. I've just been playing the game because I want to provide a perfect transition to a winning endgame, letting black play the absolute best moves. Of course, these best moves came only at some point. We had to go through the potential mistakes that black could have done. They happen a lot. And these are just normal moves. They appear normal to humans, but they're actually compromising mistakes. It all happened with bishop c5 move and knight c6, which allowed white to play knight to a4 and create this ugly pawn structure. And then we just talked about how the kingside attack will work by letting black play the absolute best ways to defend, but white wins that anyway. Right, back at this position as we were before, we played knight to g2 e7, and there was a pawn, the pawn went to f5, and we notice how black king castling on the short side is a suicide. So the more accurate move is king castling queenside. We respond to this with queen to g4. And we already have a great advantage. We're targeting this pawn, and this pawn cannot play this move because of this f6 move, which wins the piece, because this is a discovered check. So best move by black is to give up the pawn. f6 is considered the best move by the engine, and we can take the pawn. Also because, think about it, right? If black doesn't play f6, we still have this attack. What else are you gonna do? Like, a black king moving, we can take the pawn. It's a free pawn and it's not poisoned. The pawn in g2 is protected by the bishop. You always watch out for these kind of threats like rook counterattacking, but in this case it's not going to be possible. So after f6 best move, we take the pawn, and I'm going to stop the line already, because after this move, rook d to g8, just to make an example. Also because if the other rook attacks, then you win another free pawn, which is, again, it's just not poisoned. If you think the queen can get trapped, you're wrong, because if rook here and then queen takes, for example, rook here again, I mean, we have this square, right, f7, and we also have a pattern the way back. So let's go back here. Rook this move, rook d to g8, queen h6. White continues the endgame with the two bishops and an extra pawn and better pawn structure. There's no compensation for black. So let's have a look at another idea. After the queen takes the pawn in g7, if black continues with this idea, right? I mentioned it before, but let's go through it now properly. c4, as I said, we ignore it because it's protected by a minor piece. So we just develop the bishop to e3. And, okay, let's say the pawn takes, right? We just ignore it. We castle alongside. This pawn is not a problem. It never will be, because the first attacker of this file is the queen. So whatever the pawn decides to push, we're just going to take. And the pawn is there in d3 now. We castled. After rook h to g8, we play queen f7. In this case, it's not recommended to take the pawn, because in the bishop is the defender of d3, and at some point we might want to have to employ the bishop. And so if we take the pawn in h7, then the black player will be able to attack our queen through the g file and attack g2. G2 will become a bit of a problem for white. Since the bishop has become a little bit more important, we're going to have to keep control of d3. So let's not get too greedy. After rook f8, queen c4, and knight to a5, attacking the queen. This is assuming that your opponent will play like a computer, playing the best moves. And now the white queen continues with going to a4, and after, let's make this example of the knight improving the position, going to c6. White can finally play rook to d3, and the queen will have to move. Well, the only square available is queen to e7, and now the white player goes on with rook to d5 to capitalize the game. And we are going to take the piece, we're going to give the rook for 2 pieces. Best move by black is rook to d8, and we can just proceed and take the knight. After take, we are now transitioned into an endgame where we have queen, rook, and 2 bishops against queen and 2 rooks, while we have one more pawn, and the bishop pair is what we love the most. So king to b8 doesn't work because we can simply go to a7. So if black tries something like a6, let's see how to continue this. So if black plays a6, let's see how to continue this. You might think we're far from the opening, and we are at move 22 right now. We're not going to memorize 22 moves, but this, once you watch this video all over and over, and once you start playing the Vienna all the time, eventually these positions will actually happen. You'd be surprised to know how many times I actually ended up in this very position. So now the best move is bishop takes pawn. And there's 2 scenarios now that give birth to the exact same result. Either the pawn takes or the king moves to b8. The same thing will happen. So let's say pawn takes, check, king to d7. Also because king to b8 allows bishop check. And after this move, we can win the queen. So after the check, king goes to d7, rook d1 check, king to e8, and now we take the rook. The king cannot take back because of the skewer. We end up playing the endgame with an extra piece. If the queen takes back, queen check, attacking the rook as well, king moves, bishop h6 check, forcing the rook to play to g7, only move. And now white continues with the torturing move a4, which is so beautiful because it looks like a quiet move right in the middle of a storm. But actually this is a passed pawn, and we have a majority here, so we're going to be producing a queen. And if black wants to try and swap everything, we will do it with pleasure because we have a passed pawn and we're going to win. So let's go back to this scenario. One quick look. Bishop takes, king can try to play b8. Same thing happens. Bishop again, sacrificing for the 2nd time in a row. Bishop takes, this time with threatening checkmate, so the king has to take. And now queen b5 check, king c8, queen a6 check, king d7, and here we are, rook d1, and it's the same scenario as before. We will continue like that.